So not too long ago, Bloomberg put out an article featuring the game journalist Jason Schreier, who talked to Carrie Patel, the director of Avowed, and it was pretty revelatory in the sense that we found out pretty much what went wrong with the game in terms of its development cycle. And the most important thing that turns out to be the case is that Avowed actually went through development hell. It went through 6 years of development hell and 2 different iterations. It seems to be the case that originally they did indeed plan on making a massive game, and not just a massive game of the sort such as Skyrim, but a massive game of the sort such as Destiny and Skyrim, a multiplayer game. And this original version, this version of a Skyrim/Destiny clone of massive open world and multiplayer, was the version that had been shown to us in the form of this very impressive cinematic trailer from some years back. That was the original plan, but it turned out to be not so viable. That was then scrapped, and that's when they brought Carrie Patel, the current director of Avowed, onto the team, and they tried to at least follow through in certain respects on the original project, and then they realized that the multiplayer thing wouldn't work, and later on it turns out that the open world feature would not have worked. So it turns out that they had to basically revamp the whole thing, and she was brought on quite late. And we need to be honest here. I have nothing against Carrie Patel, but this was her directing debut. And her background is primarily in writing and narrative design, which is all well and good and it's important, but she didn't have the hands-on experience a lot of people have had as a game director. For example, there's no way you could compare her to somebody like Josh Sawyer. He has had to bloody his hands several times over in the realm of game direction. Carrie Patel was a newbie. And this article also reveals that, given the fact that Carrie Patel was a newbie, she had to learn a lot about game engineering and very technical things that she previously had no knowledge of. And the gist of the article, essentially, is such that if you take into account the 2 reboots that the game had undergone within its development cycle of 6 years, and 6 years is a relatively long development cycle, all things considered. Not the longest. It's not like Dragon Age The Veilguard, but still pretty long nonetheless. When you take that into account, and then take into account the fact that Carrie Patel was a newbie director and all these things, I think it helps explain why the game seems to be in many ways to many people disjointed and overall a disappointment. And it also tells us that the original reaction to the cinematic Avowed trailer, one which, let's be honest, evoked images and feelings of Skyrim, was not incorrect. That was the correct emotional and visual reaction to what they presented to us. And there was in fact a shift in game design and development. And inasmuch as you had stuck with that original vision and had not kept up with what it has become, then yes, you are definitely going to be disappointed, and you were disappointed. So I think there are a couple of takeaways from this. One, again, nothing against Carrie Patel, but if you're a first-time game director, and on top of that, you need to direct a game that is being rebooted, and you have to learn all these kinds of things. You're not just a newbie game director. You have no background in the technical aspects of game design, the engineering aspects, and what have you, coding, etc., etc. You have a lot on your plate. So the first question you can ask is, was it the right decision to put Carrie Patel on the game as game director? And I think probably not. I think ultimately, obviously, Josh Sawyer would have been a much better choice, but we don't know the details. It might have been that Josh Sawyer was offered the position and declined or didn't want to do it. We know he's talked about a willingness to direct a new game, and specifically a willingness to direct a Pillars of Eternity 3 if he gets the massive budget of, say, $100 million that he wants. But we don't know about that. And there are some plus points to Carrie Patel as well. She had this background in Pillars of Eternity. As I've stated in my review video, the world of Eora is very much connected to Avowed. The game is steeped in this, and you probably won't understand it or even like it if you don't know anything about the Pillars of Eternity universe. And so it was a difficult choice they made, a difficult decision. And Carrie Patel had a lot on her plate. Now, from my personal perspective, to employ her as game director, on the one hand, but I think given the travails and difficulties that the project of Avowed had undergone, the 2 reboots, the fact that it took 6 years, she did an okay job. I'm not saying the game is amazing. I, at the end of the day, did not recommend the game to you people, as I have said many times already. But if you like the Pillars universe, if you like the continuity of that, then Avowed is an okay game. And I have to say, it's simply not true. When you look at all the clickbaity videos out there saying Avowed is just as bad as Dragon Age, the Veilguard, it's not. It's not a Concord level failure. It's not a Dragon Age, the Veilguard level piece of slop. It's an okay game. And if you like Pillars of Eternity, you might like it more. That is the reality of this game. However, there's no doubt that the final result that we've seen is the direct result of this development hell cycle that the game had gone through. It probably explains, for example, the fact that the game just seems very off in some respects. You have the static NPCs, you have the inability to interact with things, because the game for the longest period of time didn't know what direction it wanted to go in, and it was rebooted twice. Now, a lot of people have drawn the comparison between Avowed and Outer Worlds, and I personally did not enjoy Outer Worlds very much. I thought the story was really bland. That's just my opinion. But obviously, the character creator was better. It had more environmental interactivity in the sense that you could grab objects, you could drop objects. Your stats had greater meaning as well. You could have a really dumb character, and that would display in the dialogues, and it would add nuance and different role-playing aspects to the game. You don't see any of that in Avowed, and I think a big part of that is the fact that it went through development hell. And I absolutely do not blame people that have no interest in this game. I'm not defending the game as a universally fantastic product. It is not. I've said my piece about this multiple times. It's an okay game, and if you like Pillars a lot, you'll probably like it a fair bit. But what this tells me ultimately is it's a shame, obviously, that the game went through development hell because it suffered a lot for it, and it probably wasn't the best idea to put a complete newbie into the position of game director. One can only hope that Obsidian has learned its lesson here. If they end up working on expansions, which I personally hope they do, again, just a personal wish. I know I'm not completely eviscerating the game like a lot of you want me to, but if they work on expansions, DLC, however you want to term that, then hopefully they improve and iterate upon the things that they've done correctly and improve upon the things that they did not do correctly. Now, me personally, I only played the base game of Outer Worlds back in the day, but allegedly there was DLC later on that apparently was quite good, an improvement over the base game, and so one can only hope for that. And whatever happens with sales, we don't know yet. If more Avowed is greenlit in the future, I'm hoping that there is a more coherent vision, and that the game is not stuck in development hell, and that the final product is much, much better than what we received in the first iteration of the series. Now, we all know, for example, that the Outer Worlds 2 game that they're working on is much bigger than the original Outer Worlds, so if that's any hint, if Avowed does sufficiently well in the eyes of Microsoft and its investors, and another game in the universe is then greenlit, then it probably would be bigger as well. Because both Outer Worlds and Avowed come off as AA games. We don't know the exact numbers in terms of budget, but we can only hope that whatever happens with Avowed right now, that it does reasonably well, and that they improve upon the bad things they did in the game, and improve upon the good things, with the hope that long-term it transforms from an okay game into a good to very good game that has, to be perfectly honest, more universal appeal. It's all well and good that people like Pillars probably will like Avowed to varying degrees, and I've talked to a bunch of people by now who all have a very extensive background in the Pillars series. 90% of them like Avowed, like I said. But I don't think that's enough, so hopefully the things that a more normal audience look for, environmental interactivity, more lifelike cities with NPCs walking around, this sort of thing, those are the biggest complaints thus far. Those things are integrated into a future game, but it remains to be seen. Like I said, I think the big test of time will be the question of expansions and or DLC. Now, the map of Avowed, the Living Lands, has only been partially plotted out. There are entire areas, there's a snowy region, for example, in the Living Lands, that I suspect we might end up exploring if an expansion is in fact made. And that will be the true test. If the expansion improves upon everything that was already good in the game, and improves upon all the negative aspects, making them more neutral, or even making them positive, then I think we can look forward to future Avowed content that is more universally appealing and just better overall. So very unfortunate that the game went through development hell. Probably, like I said, not the best decision to have Carrie Patel as director, as a total newbie. Nothing against her, but her background was not a technical one. She's a writer, and she was thrown in at the deep end. Not making excuses for her, just being descriptive here. Josh Sawyer would have been a better pick 100%, but hopefully, given all of this, assuming they learn lessons, assuming the DLC, if there is DLC, is good, and an improvement upon the base game, hopefully then we can look forward to a better product down the line in whatever game they end up making if it continues the Pillars of Eternity universe, which I personally, for obvious reasons, because I'm very invested in the universe, would like to see very much. And I know, having conversed with a number of people who are also die-hard fans of the Pillars universe, they too would like to see a continuation of the universe. Preferably, of course, as a Pillars of Eternity 3 game, but let's be perfectly honest, we will probably never see Pillars of Eternity 3 because Josh Sawyer will only make that game if he gets a boatload of money, and I do not see Microsoft being very forthcoming on that. It probably will never happen. But we can all dream, we can all hope. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in, and if you like my content, you like my takes, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. It's much appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I will check you out next time. Take care.